Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and Chief Burnout Officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Phyllis Quinlan online. Phyllis, how are you?
I am great this morning, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a nice, beautiful, sunny day. I always like those. They're nice. So why don't you share a little bit about you, and then we're going to jump into this very important conversation.
You bet. Well, I am a registered nurse by training. I've been practicing in the clinical, administrative, and educational forums for the better part of 40 years, but I am also a professional coach. And I've been a professional coach for the better part of 20 years, doing one-on-one coaching, career coaching, life coaching, and executive coaching. And I am certified by the International Coaching Federation. I've had my consulting company, MFW Consultants, now for 30 years. I celebrated my 30-year mark in January. So, I'm really having a good 2024.
Congratulations on your anniversary. And I'm looking at what you said, 40 years. I'm like, I don't think that's right, but you're the one that said it, not me. So I'll trust your math. And I know nurses can math usually. They're usually pretty good. Having worked in the healthcare sector for a better part of 15 years myself, knowing how critically important nurses are to the system and to the organization and just navigating the healthcare system. So, throughout your career, and especially with how you've been able to mix all of those skill sets together, has obviously proven beneficial because you bring so much experience from different areas and kind of mesh them together to match, the needs of whoever your audience happens to be.
That is true. When people ask me, how people respond to my coaching or they respond to my keynote speaking, what is the secret sauce? And I just simply tell them that I speak caregiver. I speak the language of professional and family caregivers. I've listened to them. I coach hundreds of people a year. And, I've been blessed enough to gain their trust so that they are sharing with me, what their thoughts, their hopes, their dreams, their concerns and challenges are. So I come at it with that, knowledge.
Well, it's a great skill set, and I really believe that the nursing background provides just an amazing foundation that a lot of other coaches just simply wouldn't have because you understand, the actual, physical health of an individual, but also the mental side of things. And, that's something that we have seen, during the pandemic and definitely before the pandemic, where there was a lot of workplaces that were simply not healthy, and not just physically healthy, but mentally healthy. So I know that's been a big chunk of the work that you've been doing recently. So why don't you share your insights on that?
I welcome the opportunity to talk about this, Michael, because it's a true concern of mine. A lot of people want to label, professional caregivers, and those are people who work in healthcare, regardless of how they manifest their caregiving, as being burnt out. I'm not quite sure how we went from healthcare heroes to burnt out in about 2.5 years, but that's what the media is trying to say. And I just really need to share that I am talking to these people one-on-one, or in conferences, and it's not my reality. My reality is that, yes, the navigating COVID really tested people's physical endurance. And yes, at times, certainly our stamina, our optimism, but it was a time when people came together as a collective and actually beat back this bug that was trying to, destroy mankind. And when you navigate through fear and you go into learning and then you go into mastery, you come out the other side of that, far more empowered than you were before. So when I talk to the professional caregivers, again, clinicians, executives, um, you, when I say to them, tell me about your COVID experience, almost to a person, they say to me, I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. So that's the language of growth, Michael. That's not the language of burnout. And it's really, really important for leaders in the 21st century to understand that that's where their staff is at, that they are stronger and feeling far more empowered and competent and confident than they ever thought they could be, which means that the leadership imperative for the 21st century is to level up your skills to be able to lead that new sense of empowerment and confidence, and really capitalize on it for your organization or your department. And then also create the healthiest work environment possible to support that growth.
I love that. And one of the things that I've done throughout my career, and I don't remember how I picked this up. I'm sure I saw a leader do it and I thought, oh, that was a great idea. I'm going to use it. Was whenever I encountered an employee or a colleague going through a tough time, I I made an assumption. This is probably not the first time that they've ever experienced a challenge in their life. Just a hunch. So I would, ask them, it's like, okay, tell me a time when you had to face something that was really tough for you, real big challenge, and how did you overcome it? And they've never, ever said what I'm going through right now. They always go back in time and think about a challenge and how they overcome it. And I said, so you beat it, right? You survived it, you navigated through it. Yep. So, well, guess what? You can do that again now. So, what did you learn back then? What were some techniques that you learned to navigate through it? Any of those be useful right now? And all of a sudden, it just gives them that glimmer of, okay, yeah, this is tough right now, but I can get through this.
Yes.
Sometimes that's all it needs is just a little encouragement and, providing that arena that, will be as safe as it can be for that individual, whether it's a teammate or an employee or a loved one, family member, you name it. And it's just, re-encouraging people, because when we're beaten down and we're working those long hours, our cognitive abilities start to impact. We start to second guess our decisions. I've seen way too many nurses leaving the field. And it scares and I'm sure it does you too, scares the crap out of me, because as you know, as a clinician, the population's getting older. The challenges that they face are getting more complex, and we need more healthcare professionals, not less. And when I see nurses say, I'm done with this, I'm walking away from this, and then they go work at Target, nothing against Target, but it's a loss for society when they do that. And we have to create these environments, and management and leaders need to figure out that their behaviors and how they lead can be a really big contributor to why our people are struggling and up and leaving. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Um, I couldn't agree more. I think, again, we're going to go pre-COVID and post-COVID here, because I do think that was a definitive moment for many professional caregivers. Um, and again, pre-COVID, I honestly think that administrators and leaders relied on the one thing that professional caregivers will always dig down and find, and that's their grit. And come on, we'll just get through the Joint Commission, or come on, let's just get through the Department of Health, or let's get through this hurricane or snowstorm, or and if you ask people who are by nature people of service, they're going to show up fully to do that. The problem now is that we started to see what overuse of grit, which is a survival skill. It's not a thriving skill, it's a survival skill. Overuse of grit, leads to extreme endurance. And then you can get on a highway then to burnout, because you start to lose connection between your mission and your purpose. What I see post-COVID now is that people really had a close encounter with how important it is to be advocates for themselves first. And I put to you that if the caregivers went down across the planet would have been doomed. That thank God we were able to find our grit, but thank God we were able to learn from that experience and say, I have to take care of myself first, or I'll have nothing to give anyone else on a day-to-day basis, let alone in a crisis that is prolonged for 18 months or so. So now we're talking about building resilience, which is really optimal coping. And we are talking to the staff about, what are you doing for self-care? How are you managing your stress? We're talking to them about what they're doing. What we're not necessarily paying enough attention to is if they do the work and come to a toxic or unhealthy work environment, well, then, it's not going to be sustainable. Why should they do this only to come and bleed it out in an unhealthy work environment? So it's almost like we're talking talk, but not walking the walk. And that's why I do think that this is the leadership imperative for the 21st century. And I think those organizations that are not mindful of this are experiencing bleeding talent. And they're experiencing people who are reluctant to come back into the workplace and maybe want to work in a hybrid fashion or remote fashion. And, and we're struggling with this. Well, why can't it go back to the way it was? And again, I bring to your attention, that's because the people who are in these professions or in these roles are not the way they were pre-COVID. They are stronger, more confident, more capable than ever. And you have to level up not just your leadership skills, but your work environment in order to sustain them and hold on to that talent.
In many ways, it's like, relationships. Well, it is a relationship, but it's kind of like dating, when you want to put your best foot forward. And before, the pendulum seemed, you could debate whether or not it was actually this case, but it seemed that, the employers were the ones that were kind of controlling things, and they were, holding everything, and everybody was like, I can't lose my job. I need this and this. And then COVID happened, and it was a reckoning. We heard about the Great Reset or the Great Resignation or all the other phrases that popped up during that time frame. But ultimately, it boils down to it was kind of a shift to a different dimension for a lot of people, where they realized that I am not going to subject myself to this type of work and environment anymore. I'm going to either A, find an environment that's closer to what I want for my career, or I'm going to semi-retire, or I'm going to leave completely, or I'm going to go into a different industry, or I'm going to go out on my own and launch my own business. And it gave people that courage to do it, because they realized, quite frankly, life is very short. So, you could fail staying at an organization that goes out of business, or you could potentially succeed by launching your own. And again, I see all kinds of different cases on that. And it frustrates me and scares me that organizations are still trying to use that old playbook pre-COVID, because it's not working, and they're going to fail. And, a stat that I love to share is, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000 are either gone or were acquired. So these are the top 500 companies on the planet. Half of them are gone. So if you're an organization and you think, well, we'll just hire more people and we'll withstand all of this, guess again, because if you don't treat your people right, you won't have any people, you won't have any customers, and you'll be DOA.
Yeah. So, again, I think pre-COVID, everybody was talking about self-care, burnout. What are you doing for yourself? You need to take care of yourself. And now we are faced with that's 50% of the equation. So that if I am doing the work, which many are doing and have that realization that they need to take really good care of themselves in order to be able to be in a service profession, that leadership needs to then say, okay, what is the other part of the 50% of the equation? And that's going to come down to systems that are not working and relationships that are not working or need to be built. And it's also going to come down to finally addressing the disruptive behaviors of bullying and chronic incivility, because staff are they're just not willing to put up with that nonsense any longer.
And how would a leader, or let's say, a board of directors or the CEO, if they know that they have leaders in their organization that are behaving the pre-COVID way, what are some techniques that they could do? Obviously, bringing you in would be a big help, but some things that they could start to kind of change the tide a little bit. And hopefully they recognize that, they're causing these challenges. A lot of times people point blame, well, they're this and that. And it's like, no, you got, what's my role in this? And that it's something that I learned very late in the game, unfortunately, but I have learned that over my life that anytime there's a challenge or an issue or a problem, I first go, okay, what's my role in this from my perception? And then just ask, the other party, okay, what am I doing that's creating this issue and what can we do to resolve it? And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on, what organizations can start to do to kind of change the tide so they can be more welcoming and quite frankly, a better place to work.
Well, I think if we're addressing leadership, confidence, and competency, I'm hard pressed to think that executive leadership doesn't know who of their leaders are leaning more transactionally as opposed to more humanistically. And if they don't know, well, that's telling in and of itself. It's the decision whether they're going to act on what they know. And I think the time for turning a blind eye or saying, well, it's good over here, and this is, the price of business, like, these metrics are great, these metrics are great, and that's why we kind of condone or don't necessarily act on the bad behavior. But I think we need to construct different metrics that are really going to be more humanistic in nature, that capture, a sense of followership, not just employees, that hold leaders accountable to creating, a culture of citizenship. So we get away from the whole idea of having an employee and having someone who's a citizen of a department, a citizen of an organization. The thing that worked in COVID was that we all came together on a level playing field. There were, the competition was over. Everybody had their role. Everybody, did what they needed to do. Environmental services were seen on the same, if not higher, than medicine. I mean, if you didn't have environmental services doing what they did, infection prevention doing what they did, medicine was useless. So it was a real level playing field. And unfortunately, as soon as things started to ease off, people went back into their silos. That's the time for executive leadership to grab the reins and say, no, 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 we can't go back to that pre-COVID mentality of there's a silo over here and a silo over there, and there is more important and less important. What got us to the point of being able to save the planet and humanity was a collective idea of solidarity. And we have outgrown cooperation. We have outgrown collaboration. We are now in need in the healthcare industry of solidarity. And we're not going to have that without dignity, without understanding that everybody's contribution is equally important. I just offer my contribution is different than yours, but not less or more than yours. And understanding different and wrong or less are not synonyms, and really starting to develop this culture of flat where we're all here together and remembering what got us through COVID. And letting go of the idea of we're going to go back to the way it was, because we're not.
Ego plays a big part of it, but I love, the flatness of organizations as well. I kind of use you're in a long rowboat and everybody's rowing, and some people are rowing this way, some people are that way, but you're moving in the same direction together. And some people without one person could be the janitor, or without the CEO, that ship is not going to operate at its best. And understanding, and I've seen this dynamic working in healthcare, some egos and differences of opinion and all of that. But ultimately, the more uh, silo less you can get in an organization, the better. And it was one of I hate saying the word positive, but one of the things that came out from COVID, especially in the early days when everyone outside of healthcare, other than certain roles in the organization, were sent home, and we had to figure out how to work remotely and how to collaborate with each other. In healthcare, it was okay. We need everybody here. We got to implement some systems in place. All the things that had to be done, whether it was in a primary care setting or hospital setting or any long-term care facilities, seniors homes, hospice, you name it. There were protocols that had to be put together, and they had to be put together like next to yesterday, basically. And whenever I have this opportunity, I commend everybody when we navigated through those first couple of months, because we really, while we had a warning, we didn't have a warning. And it was very abrupt. It hit, and all of a sudden, it completely changed how we had to work. And those barriers and walls got knocked down. And we went, okay, you do this. Okay, we need this. Okay, this vendor does this and that. And it was basically a disaster recovery type of situation at first, to the point where, okay, we're able to operate and serve our client, customer, patient, you name it, and they did it quickly. And it shows what we can do and what
Yes.
we're capable of. And people, as lousy as that situation was, and the loss of life and everything else, deep down, I think a lot of people enjoyed that aspect of working together. And there's no
Totally.
reason why we can't continue doing that.
Building on your analogy of everybody rowing in a rowboat, a long rowboat. It's time for executive leadership to understand that we're going to have to deal effectively with disruptive behaviors and poor performers. That your talent um, is no longer going to look the other way. They're not going to hunker down and go to grit and power through. They're not going to, they're not going to, okay, I'll pick up the slack for someone who can't do their job, can't get to work on time, or is actually abusive in their behavior. I'm just not going to do that anymore. I'm going to go find a different environment that's going to support where I am at now. And we have done notoriously poor work in and around holding people to accountability, and really leaning in and effectively managing chronic incivility and true abusive behavior.
Yeah, someone that's near and dear to me is going through that very same situation where they work, and and I know this isn't the case per se, but from an employee standpoint, it's as if that the management is rewarding the bad behavior, and someone that is just trying to do their job, nose to the grind, just get in, do their job, be the best that they can be, and go home and live their life, seems treated like, well, you don't want to participate in the drama, you don't want to participate in the back talk and the nuances of the behavior that's being rewarded. And it ends up being a toxic environment. All of a sudden, these organizations lose good people, and the bad performers celebrate until they realize how much that good performer was working, and all of a sudden they got stuck with the work, and then it doesn't taste as good now, does it? But unfortunately, we see that time and time again. And I completely agree with you on the lack of accountability. And I think of Tom Peters' old quote, hire slow, fire fast. In that situation, and I've done that too. And when I was leading organizations, if there was toxic behavior, I followed the HR rules and all of that, but I moved those people along as fast as I could, and and then secondly would give them a letter of recommendation to another organization based on the skills that they did bring. Because just because they weren't a good fit for our organization doesn't mean they wouldn't be a good fit somewhere else. Now, there was a couple people that I wouldn't let them or give them a recommendation ever, because they've got their own issues, or as I like to say, some people have issues, some people have subscriptions. So people that understand magazines understands that reference. But long story short, majority of people deep down are decent. But when you tolerate, as a leadership team, bad behavior, and you don't hold anybody accountable to it, your good people's going to leave, because they're not going to stay there anymore. There's plenty of opportunities elsewhere.
If we look at employee engagement scores, which I know a lot of healthcare organizations do, in my humble opinion, we have been addressing them completely backwards. So if you get an employee engagement score, you're probably going to get some kind of a grid where, based on the questions, you're going to have employees respond in the green, a positive way, in the yellow, sitting on the fence, and then in the red, they totally disagree. But I think those of us who have led over the years realize that when we go to creating action plans and we partner, perhaps with our human resources, or what the message from on high is that you've got to do whatever you can to move your reds into at least the yellow or the green. And I'm here to tell you, if somebody's wedded to having a bad attitude or doing the minimal or being disruptive or bullying in the workplace, you're not going to move them with a stick of dynamite. So my sense is why are we putting so much time and effort and heartbreak into trying to work with people who are in the red, as opposed to giving 80% to 85, 90% of our efforts to those that are in the green? I say grow the green, create a critical mass of positive thinking people who are really willing and able to give their very best, their personal best on any given day. They will influence the people in the yellow by their positive attitude and how things are getting better. And with any luck, the reds will try to disrupt this, but they'll realize that they're a little outnumbered and perhaps they'll leave, or perhaps they'll stay. And if they stay, you treat them with dignity, you're respectful, you're not going to treat them any less, but you're not going to be hyper vigilant on their needs that will never, ever, ever be met. You will never satisfy these people. Meanwhile, you exhaust yourself working with people who are identifying this red area, and then you have little or nothing to give to the people who are coming in day to day to move your organization in a positive direction, and then you wonder why you bleed talent.
I love that, and you're spot on with that. It's you strengthen your strengths. If you focus on your weaknesses, you're not likely to move the needle very much. But if you strengthen your strengths,
Right.
then you'll get more people in the green. You'll gather more in the yellow, and those ones that are in the red or in the closer to the red area will either self-select, or if they're a narcissist and realize they're not going to get fed there, then they will self-select and leave, or using a late Jack Welch term, may have to dehire them, depending on the situation. And go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, but it's counterintuitive to give more attention to bad behavior. Because again, once you speak to these people, well, what is it you need? You know what I mean? It's outrageous stuff, or it doesn't, or they can't tell you, or what they want is just attention. And you can be respectful. You can, you don't have to be capricious and arbitrary. You can be professional with these folks. If there's something that's within your realm to be able to affect a change on, we can certainly address those things. But by and large, these folks have a mindset that will never shift. And it's really, really important to be able to, build that healthier work environment with the people who are pulling in the direction that you want your organization, your department to go in, so that they feel validated. Those people in the green, all right, that are identifying as green in your engagement surveys, are scratching their head going, I don't know why I'm working so hard, because all the attention and whatnot is being given to these folks. And meanwhile, we're doing all we can to try to keep body and soul together to create a positive environment or move an initiative forward. And we've just got it backwards.
Completely agree. Phyllis, love this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Well, probably LinkedIn is the easiest place to get a hold of me. So Phyllis Quinlan on LinkedIn, and message me, connect with me and message me. You can also go to my website, which is mfwconsultants.com, Michael Frank William, mfwconsultants.com, and you can reach out to me there.
Awesome. And I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So Phyllis, always good to talk with a fellow advocate making and creating healthy workplaces. So thanks again for your time today, and really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.